So, Renato, Trump has received another target letter, this time for the January 6th case. Is this going to be the most important case against him?
It's complicated. I'm Renato Mariotti. I'm a former federal prosecutor, a practicing lawyer, and a legal analyst.
And I'm Asha Rangappa. I teach national security law at Yale University. I'm a former FBI special agent, and I'm a legal contributor for ABC News.
And we're here to help you understand topics that can't be boiled down into a soundbite or a tweet. So, Asha, we delayed our recording a little bit because there's been some breaking news.
Yeah, it's like Groundhog Day.
No
Trump
kidding,
received
right?
another target letter. Yeah, and it's strange because, I suppose there could be people who have been living under a rock and who haven't, been following the first two set of indictments in New York City and then in Mar-a-Lago. But, you go back on and it does feel like, what does it mean to get a target letter? And it's like, it means he's going to get charged with a crime.
Yes.
We're kind of saying the same thing. We've seen this movie play out a little bit already.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's interesting because at some point this becomes, it's old hat, right? Like it's yet another indictment, but this is an important one. I would say, look, Trump is getting the full R. Kelly treatment, or Michael Avenatti. Pick your criminal of, who's been charged in many different jurisdictions. He's getting the full R. Kelly where he's getting charged all over the place. But this one, regardless of what comes of this prosecution, I think there's an argument, and that's what he said up front. There's an argument that it's the most important or that it's very consequential just because of the subject matter, right? Because it's historic. It's the first case of its kind.
Yes, I would say, so I will make the argument that I think it's the most consequential because this is about vindicating a direct attack on our democracy. Now, as I mentioned to you before we started the podcast, I don't know that it's the most straightforward. It does not seem to be. Definitely not in the way that the documents case is. So I'm not talking about the, provability or, the ease of prosecution or anything like that. But I'm talking in terms of the significance. This is something that this was a crime against the United States where we were all victimized on January 6th. Like we all watched this happen. And so there is a way in which that harm has to be vindicated. And it has to be vindicated by charging Trump with something. And I think that that's really important. I symbolically, I think it's very important. And we can get into this a little bit later. I think also for those symbolic reasons, I am really keen to find out what Trump is going to be charged with, because I have some thoughts on what he should be charged with.
To me, does any of this turn on what he's charged with? In other words, inciting an insurrection is one thing, and I actually think the evidence there is stronger than people may think, although there's obviously some significant First Amendment issues there. But if he's just charged with, let's say, false statements in a federal proceeding or conspiracy to defraud the United States or something along those lines, or let's say, a conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, is that still is consequential?
This is significant because part of what Trump has always been able to do is keep himself at arm's length from evidence of his criming, right? Often using lawyers and other intermediaries and lackeys around him to do his dirty work. So we see, for example, in the Manhattan DA's case, who was he using? He was using Michael Cohen. In the Mar-a-Lago case, he was using his lawyers there, Evan Corcoran, to try to do these things. In the January 6th case, it seemed especially so that he had this whole buffer of people around him, including lawyers, that I feel like even to charge him with the conspiracy to obstruct Congress or a conspiracy to make false statements, Smith is going to have to show that he knew, right? Like he knew of the scheme and he agreed to participate in it, not just like that he was floating around. And to me, that is significant if he has made that tie and is able and willing to prove it. 100%. I have been team 2383 from the get-go, and I was poo-pooed a long time ago about how, Garland will never bring those charges because of the First Amendment issues. But we can talk about this too, which is if he's charged with incitement, or what is it? Insurrection or rebellion is the name of the statute. That is really important because it carries as a penalty a prohibition from holding public office. It's really the only crime that has that penalty and, in my opinion, can be applied to the President of the United States because that statute seems to operationalize Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which constitutionally prohibits someone who is engaged in insurrection or given aid or comfort to people who have rebelled from holding office.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So first of all, let me just say, to take a step back from that for a moment, I generally do agree with you that this prosecution is incredible and historic and very well may be the most important prosecution, regardless of the outcome and regardless of what comes of it. I think I agree with that. But for me, actually, for Trump, if I'm looking at it, the way I would look at this is I actually thought there's a very good chance that there would be no charges for Trump out of January 6th. And I think I will say this. I think a lot of prosecutors would not touch this. And not because they're scared of charging Trump or anything along those lines, but just simply that these are not the sort of typical cases that are charged and they're fraught with a whole slew of legal and factual issues. And I think one thing that Trump has been able to exploit during his presidency and after, but particularly during his presidency, were times where, he was abusing his power, but not doing things that are obviously straight up crimes that we're used to charging. Mar-a-Lago, that was super straightforward. Like, hey, you're keeping classified documents in your pool or your bathhouse or whatever. Okay, that's an obvious crime. Here, he was doing all sorts of bizarre stuff, and it shouldn't surprise anyone to think like, he's just going to get away with it again. And here he is charged. So it's going to be path breaking from a legal perspective. I think, though, regarding insurrection, that I agree.
Kevin, can I pause for 1 second on the point of a typical prosecutor wouldn't touch this? It does seem to me especially appropriate that the special counsel who was tapped to do this is a war crimes prosecutor. This man has gone after heads of state. Like, let's face it, prosecuting heads of state, former heads of state, is really not something that any prosecutor would ever want to touch, right? It's very hard to do it. And so there's something very fitting that Jack Smith was the one chosen for this particular job, and he seems to be up to the task, because if anyone knows how fraught these types of prosecutions are, even though he's done it in obviously international context, but to understand how to conceptualize it, the broader implications of it, he's your man.
Yeah, I agree.
He's not just an oblivious prosecutor who thinks, this is just like anything else. He fully understands the implications.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of that. I mean, it's interesting too. I think that not being wedded. So if you come from the world of, let's say, prosecuting white collar crime and things like that, you can get into, you can be very focused on sort of the issues with cases, because those cases can be hard to prove. I think for him, maybe this doesn't seem as complicated as some of the stuff, to use one of our favorite words, as some of the cases that he was dealing with internationally. I think one thing that, by the way, has not aged very well is the take, and I always thought this was silly from day one, where there's all these people thinking that when Smith got appointed, that it was a delay tactic, or Garland, this was just another way for Garland to kick the can down the road. Yeah, so Smith's been incredibly aggressive. But to get back to your insurrection point, by the way, I mean, what the interesting thing there is, first of all, there is going to be some sort of argument there, right? Constitutional argument as to whether or not this, fact can prevent him from running. But in any event, it kind of dovetails with another issue that we don't know about right now as of the time of this recording, which is the trial date issue in Mar-a-Lago. Like, we had to record sometime, everybody. Okay, we delayed this long enough, and we couldn't delay it forever. We don't know 100% what's going to happen with the Mar-a-Lago case, but I think there's a very reasonable probability, I would say, that the January 6th case, which hasn't even been charged yet, is not going to go to trial and have a sentencing prior to January of 2025, which is what it would take, right? Oh, I guess actually, no, just a conviction, a trial and a conviction prior to January 2025. I think there's I would say a reasonable probability. That's correct. And I know I'm going to get more angry tweets about this or more angry comments. And so this is what I'll just tell you. If John Doe got indicted for engaging in, like, I don't know, a bank robbery today, and you told me he's going to go to trial and have that completed in 2024, I'd say probably, but it's not a guarantee. If you told me it was bank fraud for $10 million, I'd say probably not. And so I don't know. I mean, it seems like a complicated case, I would think. I mean, we'll see when we see the indictment, but it's unprecedented by its nature. Very hard for me to believe that you can rush it to trial. But, I guess one thing is in DC, there are some judges there, like Judge Howell, Judge Mehta, who I think very much have the perspective, because they've been seeing, I think, also a lot of January 6th defendants. They have the perspective that this is just a devastating attack. They're in the jurisdiction that felt the damage, so they saw it with their own eyes. It would take a judge who really wants to move this forward. I know it was an easy call for me to say Judge Cannon was not that judge. I don't know if Judge Beryl Howell, for example, or Amy Berman Jackson might have a different view.
Scolded and chastised and, told the defendants that have tried to worm their way out of it that it's just not happening. And those are the foot soldiers. Those were the people that were just like vandalizing or, and obviously the people who also engaged in more violent things like, attacking police officers and stuff. But you can only imagine, I agree with you, that if that's how they feel, like, tell me how you really feel. And they've told you, I don't know that they are going to be dilly-dallying when they get a former president. I think, I will say, Renato, this is not to minimize the national security implications of the Mar-a-Lago case, which also impacts the suitability of Trump to hold an office of public trust. But the other reason that this case is significant is that he used the lever of power, his influence, and his megaphone as president to facilitate this attack on the government itself. And so there's almost a very great urgency to resolve this in some way before the election happens, because this is directly about his ability to be a leader. And look, this can go either way. There's no guarantee that he'll be convicted, but also in his interest, I suppose, to clear his name before he becomes president. I don't know. Like, there's something very essential about about the facts of this case that really matter that this gets done before the next election.
So here's how I see it. I actually think one of the challenges here, and we can look at this both from the Mar-a-Lago perspective and from the January 6th perspective. One of the challenges is there is a very intense reason why a lot of people care, including you and me, that this case gets done before the election. And it's because we all know and believe that Donald Trump's going to appoint like Jeffrey Clark or somebody like that, John Eastman, to be his attorney general, and they're going to make sure there's no prosecutions of Donald Trump if he ever gets reelected and gets put into office. And so there's an urgency to getting this case done. The challenge is that our legal system, criminal justice system, is so slow moving that in a typical case, you wouldn't expect that to happen so quickly. And so what you really need is a judge and a prosecutor to both see the need for the need for this case to be on a fast track. The prosecutor sees it and is doing everything possible in Florida to make that happen. But I'm going to predict, and this is dangerous, I suppose, before Cannon comes out, although I think I wrote a column about this months ago that's aged, in my opinion, like fine wine, that case not going to be happening before the election. I don't know if Cannon's that judge. But I think what you may see, ironically, in D.C. is almost like there's I'm not going to say evolution or maturation of the legals of the judge or the judiciary towards Trump. But I think there's a thing about learned experience. In many cases, judges give litigants some rope to take their time. Okay, there's a little bit of delay, but after a certain period of time, they've had it and they're ready. We got to move on. We got to do this. We got to do that. I think with Trump in DC in particular, with these judges, they've seen enough, they've heard enough, because judges like Howell and Jackson and Mehta, like they've seen this happen. So it depends on the judge you get. But I think there's a lot of judges in DC for whom this is not their first rodeo dealing with the Trump administration and all of the aftermath of that. And they're going to treat this like yet another Trump issue, Trump delay tactic versus the way a lot of judges might look at this like, well, okay, here's the defendant and he's got, rights and, I'll give him a little bit of rope.
Yeah. And I think really the main thing that we need to see is what he's charged with. That's kind of, we're still at the tip of the iceberg.
100%. A lot we don't know. This is purely our initial reactions. Everyone, you're getting our first impressions, so to speak. All right, Asha. So this was not even, I didn't think, if I did not have any of this on my bingo card, but now we know there's another set of charges coming, this time out of Michigan, in which, there's another one where you and I don't have a lot of the details yet, but all we know at this point is that there's been, I believe it's 16 fake electors charged with 8 different counts by complaint, not by indictment. And this is by the Michigan Attorney General, which is interesting. A bunch of different counts, forgery and election law fraud, election fraud and so forth. Felony charges, but state court charges. And it's interesting. I mean, I don't know what's more, I think this is more surprising to me than the story that Trump has, the target letter, but I think it's underrated. I think this is actually has a chance to have more. There's a chance that this becomes more consequential in the long run than the federal cases.
Well, I want to hear that, but can you explain the difference between complaint and indictment? Do you mean that this is not issued by a grand jury?
It's not. So you can usually, charges are often, I would say, obtained via an indictment. And in our Constitution, you have the right to be charged by indictment by a grand jury. In fact, that's a requirement, a constitutional requirement for all felonies, not for misdemeanors, but for all felonies. However, often, and usually this is in the case where where, for example, there's an arrest and a crime has been committed, but you don't have time to get to the grand jury before the person's arrested. You can charge someone by complaint. And what complaint is you have a law enforcement officer, let's say, Special Agent Asha Rangappa, and she types out, or I, let's say when I was a prosecutor, I would type out an affidavit with her, kind of go through, with you what the facts are. And we would lay out in detail the details of your investigation, what you've learned. We'd go to a magistrate judge. The magistrate judge would would review that and sign it and determine that there is probable cause. There would still be an indictment, but that would come later. And in the meantime, for a period of time, the person would be arrested on that complaint. And that's essentially the procedure in Michigan. There was charges that were brought by complaint, and a magistrate in Michigan, a state court magistrate, has signed those complaints. Is my understanding.
And why? I mean, that seems odd to me in this type of circumstance, because it's not like you have some time constraint or someone's fleeing. I mean, they presumably been investigating that these fake electors are like hanging around.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And I don't know all the details about it. What I would say is, one thing that comes to mind that could possibly be an explanation is that they wanted to provide more details regarding the charges. And perhaps State Court of Michigan, you'd have these very bare bones indictments that don't say anything. That's possible.
Kind of like what we saw in New York.
Yeah, so possible. Yeah, that's possible. But there may be a more nuanced state court. I'm not a Michigan lawyer. I'm a Illinois and California lawyer, not a Michigan lawyer. So I don't know the system in Michigan. So it may be that there's a more Michigan-specific reason. I do know, for example, in Michigan, that it's hard for them to charge out-of-state activity, which is my understanding of why the electors are charged and not some of the people working with them. But it's interesting, right? I have to say I didn't see that coming, and I think we don't know in the federal case, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jack Smith does not charge any fake electors. That wouldn't surprise me.
That wouldn't surprise me either, because I would think that he wants to keep this as streamlined as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, it's kind of a keep it simple, stupid, like the KISS rule. Both, I would think, and you can tell me if I'm right on this, for expediting the actual proceedings, but also, Jack Smith has a dual role here. He's not only prosecuting Trump for the crime that he committed, he's got to make sure the public understands in this case what this case is about. And that there is a clear rationale, a clear story about why Trump is being charged. And I would think that if you charge Trump with a whole slew of randos, fake electors from all over the country or whatever, it kind of muddies the waters, if not legally, then I think in the public's mind.
That's interesting. So let me just go to your first point first. I do think that whenever you charge an additional defendant, it does create an additional possibility for delay. We've already seen it with the Walton Auto charge in Florida. People are like, why is that guy not get a lawyer and this and that? Well, yeah, I mean, every time you charge a different defendant, there can be an opportunity to delay there. And a judge in DC who might have little patience for Trump might have more patience for John Q's six-pack from Michigan, who is a fake elector, or wherever, or Arizona, or wherever they're from, Georgia, who's a fake elector and kind of got roped into this. I also agree with you. There might be a sympathy factor there. And they might have a credibility that Trump doesn't have. They might get up there in their own defense and say, hey, I don't know about Trump, but I was just told to show up and sign this. I didn't know what the heck this was. I didn't know what was going on, or something like that. It's easier for them to potentially get away with that. So it does muddy the waters, and it takes the focus away from Trump. So I agree. Like I said, we don't know what the charges are. For all we know, he's flipped a bunch of them and is charging them. We don't know. But I think it's unlikely, would be my guess, that he's charging fake electors. But here we go. We have a state AG who referred this matter to the feds, didn't get a response, and has just gone ahead and indicted, which is interesting, right? The reason I said that this could be important, very important in the long run, here's why I say that. Our system of elections in this country is such that they are administered by states. And even though we would like to believe that in the state of, Connecticut, where you live, or Illinois, where I live, or wherever, that our vote counts and it leads to some elector, and, it all translates, and whoever gets the most votes becomes the president. The reality of the situation is that the only thing that makes sure that the person who is received the most votes in that state ultimately gets the electors in that state. It's usually a function of state law. And and that was why that independent state legislature theory was so dangerous, because the state legislature could just decide like, nah. But I think we're going to do our own thing. But I think what we learned in the last election was that there was a huge opportunity for shenanigans. And the shenanigans, though, required the cooperation of a lot of random people on the ground. And one of the things that kept the shenanigans from going too far is that a lot of rank and file Republicans on the ground did not go along with Trump. To their credit, a lot of people in Michigan, like state legislators, were like, yeah, we'll visit the White House and get some free stuff, but we're not going to like overturn the election. Or some guy in Arizona who's the Speaker of the House, like, yeah, no, I'm Rusty Bowers, like, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm not going to do that. But it took that, like Kemp and George's, people like that were just like, we're not going to go along with it. But there were plenty of people who did. And Trump is trying to normalize this idea of overturning elections. And I think that these prosecutions, even if they fail, send a message to these folks that there may be consequences. I think it matters, because I think that the January 6th charge against these individual insurrectionist people had a big impact. And I could see it on Twitter when Trump was trying to incite these folks to march in Manhattan, and a lot of right-wing influencers were like, don't do it. He's just going to leave you hanging. You're all going to go to prison again. Don't do it. And I could just see the same thing here. Like, you're a random mayor or a county commissioner, some local GOP official who's asked to be an elector. It's usually an honorific thing. Like, do you really, if you're mayor of some small town in Michigan, are you going to take the risk of getting yourself thrown in prison? I just think a lot of people are like, they're not like Trump. They're going to be like, I don't want to hire a lawyer and potentially face a felony. They're fundraising off of this. This is a disaster for them.
And and even if Trump wins, he can't help them.
Yeah.
These are state crimes. It's over. It's over. Like, you're going to be like sitting, Gretchen Whitmer is not pardoning you. Absolutely. And just to tie this, like, to what we were talking about with Jack Smith, probably not bringing fake electors, it's a good kind of, if that does end up being the case, and I think you're right, it's sort of complementary, right? Like, in the sense of, I suspect that Jack Smith will be charging a crime related to the fake electors, right? That's maybe like a conspiracy to present false statements, in which the broader project would be laid out, that across these 7 states, this is what was going on. Look at all these fake elector certificates. They look exactly the same. They were all from the same Word document that was being sent around that everybody agreed to, or whatever it is. In other words, he has the ability to present the whole scheme, even if he charges just Trump or Trump and, I don't know, whoever, Don Eastman or something like that. And then you leave it to the states to kind of really go after the people within their own jurisdictions who participated in that. That seems like actually an appropriate division of labor and vindication of actual federal and state interests in terms of bringing charges.
I agree with that. I think that a judgment call could be made, by the way, regarding whether or not it makes sense to charge these electors. But I'm not critical of it here. In other words, so I was very critical. Many of our listeners will remember if Alvin Bragg wasn't the biggest fan of his indictment. And it's because it was very old conduct and it was sort of out of nowhere. This is different. Like, this is a very recent crime. The forgery here is serious and could have had a massive impact in the state of Michigan, where the entire election results are thrown into question and creates a huge harm for Michigan's citizens. And it's a serious crime, and no one else is prosecuting it. So it struck me like a very reasonable exercise of prosecutorial discretion by the AG. I mean, we'll see in Arizona, for example, whether that continues there, right? Whether there's a prosecution in Arizona along similar lines. We don't know.
Exactly.
So Asha, by the way, so now we've come kind of full circle. We had that question at the beginning. which one's the most consequential? Probably is January 6th. But it's the reason that I think it is complicated, just to kind of explain my answer there, is if Mar-a-Lago goes first, if Mar-a-Lago ultimately is what he's convicted and sentenced on, I'm sure there may be a January 6th trial after that, but it becomes less, it becomes sort of like a sequel, it's like watching Blade 2. It's not quite the same thing as Blade 1. And I do think the state prosecution will have a very significant deterrent effect.
I agree.
So before we go,
you were commenting.
Yes, on your bubbly chick. This is not an ad. We got no money, although we're happy to sponsor your drinks. Both Asha and I guess, are fans of flavored water. I've tried to cut it down because I was like burping all the time by drinking.
I'm addicted.
Okay.
I'm addicted.
I used to buy that stuff by the case, so I've gotten better recently. But yeah, I love the flavored water stuff. I'm a big fan.
I do, and I have a lot of opinions.
Okay, so let's hear it.
And comments. So I am a big fan of bubbly. I like LaCroix, Fine, and Aha. So I tend to the bubbly, but like I'll drink LaCroix and Aha. Am I allowed to like slam a brand here?
Do whatever you want. I mean, if I don't represent them, I don't care. Oh, this is the one vomit. That's like the real juice that is...
It's disgusting. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. I'm sorry if you're a drinker, but like I get very angry when I go somewhere and that's their seltzer flavor. My second big, strong opinion on flavored water is that it's impossible to find in airports. I don't understand. Like, what... I'll go. So I'm really lucky because Hartford Airport actually sells like the big bubblies cans. Mm-hmm. So I like those, yes. Throw like 3 of them into my bag before I get on a plane. But there are some airports where it's like you go and it's like all energy drinks. Like they don't have flavored seltzer, and I don't understand it. It really gets me angry.
Wow. Okay, I happen to like energy drinks and flavored seltzer.
I don't drink energy drinks.
You've probably seen me drinking energy drinks on our air because I often do it after a workout. But yes, I'm a big flavored seltzer person. I'm more of a cherry bubbly person. I love cherry. Oh. It's like one of my favorite flavors. So yes, but I was definitely like maybe a little too burping because I drank so much of it. I was drinking several cans a day. So I for me, it's more of a treat now.
I've heard it's bad for your teeth. Somebody told me this.
Yes, I think it's slightly acidic.
How can it be? It's water. It's just carbonated water. I'm looking at I
don't know.
Carbonated water, natural flavor.
So one thing you're learning, everyone listening, is that we're not experts on everything. Okay, so I'll be the first to admit that I don't know anything about science, and so yeah.
So I have contemplated getting one of those home carbon, because now bubbly.
I have one,
and I've heard somebody told me not to. They said it just doesn't. It's not the same.
It's not the Soda Stream. I have the Soda Stream. I used it for a while. I was using it every day for a while. You have to buy these canisters and hook it up. It's like kind of a pain, but it's fine. It's okay for what it is. And you can put the flavor drops. It's okay. It's not quite the same.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
and didn't really stick.
All I can say is, don't ever bring me a.
Okay, wow. That is, I'm actually speechless, but I'm a bubbly fan myself. LaCroix, I think LaCroix is like old. It's sort of like
LaCroix. I didn't know. I thought it was LaCroix. LaCroix.
Okay, maybe it's LaCroix. I don't know. LaCroix, whatever it is. It was like the original, so I give it. It's like the OG.
Yeah,
right.
It was the OG. I will say I'll make a plug for a brand I do like.
Okay.
Target brand. What is it, like Good and Plenty or something like that? But they have some really good flavors.
Okay.
They have like
my wife and stepdaughter. Everyone's from Kirkland, but the Kirkland brand from Costco. But they're not. They have more like sugar in it. I don't like the ones with the aspartame in it.
Yeah, no.
I want it just Regular.
Regular.
MSW Media.